What's up, guys? This is Coach Grant with First Down Training, and today we have a very special video for you. We're going to be going over 4 different moves that wide receivers can use off the line, top of the route, that DBs cannot guard. Even if they wanted to, they cannot guard these moves. So I hope this video helps you guys out. Hope it could teach you a few new things. But also, fellas, we are coming out to 15 different states across the U.S. this year for 2-day-long QB and wide receiver camps. So if you guys would like to train with myself, my staff of coaches for 2 whole days, check out that very first link in the description below, so you can get all the info, where we're traveling to, and how you can sign up. We're coming out to San Francisco, California. That camp is totally sold out. We're totally booked for that one. But then we're going to be coming out to Miami, Florida. We only have about 4 spots left open for that camp. Then we'll be coming out to Charlotte, North Carolina. Then we'll be heading out to Las Vegas, Nevada, Portland, Oregon, Dallas, Texas, Nashville, Tennessee, Chicago, Illinois, Buffalo, New York, Atlanta, Georgia, Houston, Texas, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Detroit, Michigan, Boise, Idaho, and Los Angeles, California. So we're coming everywhere, fellas. It's going to be all across the country. So if you guys would like the opportunity to train with us, check out that very first link in the description below. Again, we'd love to have you there. Let's get started with this video. All right, guys, so the first move that we are going to be talking about today is a move that you can use against a physical press coverage DB who is going to lunge and get hands on you right away and is honestly not giving us much space off the line. So this is something that a lot of wide receivers are faced with, and they don't necessarily know how to beat this type of DB. We talk about it a lot. Like, let's say you got a DB who's 2 yards away, and let's say you got to go run like let's say it's a 10-yard out. For those 2 yards, you were trying to close the space with that DB, step on his toes, give him a fake inside, then take the outside release. But when he's not giving us any space, what do? He's essentially closing the distance for me, and it's an uncomfortable spot for a lot of wide receivers. So you got to try to make him miss laterally. I always talk about stepping vertical, attacking vertical, selling vertical, but sometimes as a wide receiver, you have to sell lateral. So let's watch what this wide receiver does. So he does a great example of a split release and a shoulder reduce. Now, this doesn't have to be always a split release. This could be like a single jab where you take your front foot and jab to the inside. This could be like you take your back foot, jab to the outside, take an inside release, but you see how he operates almost behind the line of scrimmage. He's not going backwards, but he operates behind the line of scrimmage. Now, a split release is when both feet make contact with the ground at the exact same time. Some of you might think, why would I ever do a split release against a DB who's trying to get physical and trying to get hands? And it's because it puts you into a position of balance. This, honestly, fellas, like in your receiver stance, this is not the greatest position of balance. Your feet are kind of split. It's a little bit awkward. You're standing up a little tall. But when both feet get firmly into the ground like so, this is a position of balance. If that DB were to get hands on you, and let's say it was a real physical pop off the line of scrimmage, at least you would have the base and be in a strong, low pad level position to withstand that hit, or withstand the jam, I should say. So the split release is honestly, you take your front foot and you go out and you bring your back foot straight up. You do not bring your back foot out. A lot of guys, what they do is they go way too damn wide with this split release. Their front foot goes out and their back foot goes out. So when you're super wide with your feet, that's not an explosive position either. You bring your back foot up, front foot is the one that does the splitting. So again, both feet have to make contact with the grass at the exact same time. We got to make sure that we are staying underneath a small door. That's what I like to say to my receivers. You never want to do this split release and go upward. A lot of wide receivers, that's why they think that this split release is a bad idea against physical guys, is because they will go up. You see how this receiver almost goes down. He's almost splitting down. Stay underneath a small doorway, and you will be in a good pad level position to withstand the jam, okay? So now, let's talk about the next part of this. When you guys do this split release, doing a shoulder reduce is very easy to miss this DB's hand contact, right? So you dipping your shoulder. Because we're low, you may be swatting his hands with this hand and taking the inside release, whatever it is, but you're in a position of balance so we can do these kinds of things. So a split release, making a guy miss laterally, is one of the best things that wide receivers can do when faced with a physical guy who's not giving us any space. Now, remember I talked about that inside jab. You step with the inside foot, you jab, you step outside of his frame, but you're stepping lateral. It's still a way to sell it and still a way to attack a DB's leverage if we need to, or get him to move off his platform if we need him to. So fellas, we want to make guys miss lateral when they are walked down, physical press coverage right in front of my face. So now, second move that I want to go over here is a move that you guys can use anytime that you're running a dig route versus a DB, and it's called a fake throw-by move. Now, I only like this move when you were taking an inside release on a dig. So this is where you have like head-up press, like this example, DB's outside shade, whatever it is, but you take an inside release. So it's like I said, it's a fake
throw by, you're essentially faking an out route at the top of the break, but it's a very creative way to do so. So let's talk about it. So gives this move off the line. DB jumps outside. He fakes like he's trying to slip under and throw by, and you see what that does to the DB. That gets him all kinds of separation, gets the DB to hesitate, be off balance, because we're making it look similar to another route. That's something, and we're going to talk about this through the remainder of the video. We're going to show different examples of how wide receivers can pair moves together. That's the easiest way to be unguardable, fellas. Be unpredictable. If you run, like, let's say you got like 5 routes. Let's say you're an outside wide receiver and you run a total of 5 routes. I know there's 9 on the route tree, but this is honestly like a lot of wide receivers, especially in high school. Fade, slant, hitch, comeback, post. It's a lot of what they do. You want to make all 5 routes, maybe not all 5, but like, let's say you have a dig and let's say you have an out route. You want to make your dig and your out route look very, very similar. You don't want to have 5 different ways to run all 5 routes. You want similar ways and make it look somewhat the exact same. So if I got head up press right here, and let's say I got to run an in route, obviously I want an inside release. I want to give him a fake. I want to step outside his frame. I want to take the inside release. But let's say, for example, you took an inside release and you had to run a 10-yard out route. At the break point right here, what would you do? You would take your outside hand and you'd swat the DB behind his shoulder, on his elbow, and slip under him, giving your quarterback more room to throw you open, right? Which is the beauty of this type of example, because this wide receiver had a very wide split. So if he were to be running an outside breaking route, he would have to take that inside release. So that's like kind of the IQ side of this. But he gets this DB to open up. We're running full speed. So when he puts the brakes on, he puts his hand on this DB like he's going to throw him by. He breaks down, gives a step to an area called the DB's blind spot. And again, it looks exactly like that throw by out route. And you see the amount of separation that he's able to get. Now, this move obviously takes time. Should you do this move if you were a first read? Probably not. Let's talk about a passing concept where you could do it. Let's say, for example, we have like left side of the field, we have like a hitch route, and then we have a corner route, and then like let's say over here, we have a backside dig route where you're the third read, right? Something of that nature. So like let's say, for example, the safety, or like let's say you're the outside receiver, the slot receiver's running like a split route, like an over route. So let's say you do this move, quarterback's looking to the left. Hitch is covered, corners covered, split routes covered, you're open. You could work that move at the top as just a more creative way because it's a longer developing move. I don't recommend this if you are the first read on a dig, and let's say it's like a 5-yard out dig concept, very fast, 10 yards, you're the first read. I don't recommend this. There are better ways to do this, okay? So that's a very creative way to run a dig route, but I think it's very, very tough for a DB to guard this because it looks so similar to other routes. So what are other ways that you could pair your routes together? And that has a lot to do with your releases off the ball. Conceptually, you can pair routes and releases together. So we got a DB. This wide receiver is going to be running a fade route. He's inside shade, and this is different from the first example we talked about, but he's inside shade maybe about 2 yards away. So if you have to run a fade, remember, he's inside shade for a reason. Don't let us run inside. Force us to the outside. Force us to the sideline where his help is. If we run out of bounds or we're running right next to the sideline, we're not doing anybody any good. So what we got to do is we got to close the distance with him. I got to try to step on his toes, aka attack his leverage, give him a fake inside, make him think I'm going inside, just to move him there even a little bit, and that can give me more space to run my fade. So let's watch what he does. So he does this exact thing, closes the space, and again, he gets this fade ball. He's got this DB beat by about a step and a half. Quarterback puts it back shoulder, easy catch for him. Now, let's talk about his next release here. Similar press coverage look, same receiver. Inside shade. Now, how would you run a fade? You would attack the distance with him, or you would close the distance, attack his toes, fake to the inside, go run that fade. So now this receiver is running a slant. So what he can do, because again, when we have inside shade press and we have to run a slant, I think most of you know what to do. You would attack this DB's outside shoulder and outside hip with something called a diamond release. A diamond release is where you take 3 hard steps. So you would step with your right foot, left foot, right foot, breaking off the right foot. Goal is to get that DB to open up and then slip under. But maybe it's a disciplined DB. Maybe it's a guy who doesn't just open up the first time you decide to use that. So we got to make it look like exactly how we would run my fade. If you were running a fade versus this coverage, you wouldn't just take off and run. You'd attack him first. So let's watch what this receiver does. So he comes off the ball. He attacks him first, then does the diamond release, and that's what's more likely to get that DB to open up. We pair our releases and we pair our routes together. So, comes off the ball, closes the space, gives a little move, and then watch him steps. 1, 2, 3. DB fully opened with the gate. Because he's seen this before. Like the last example we just showed on his fade route. He's seen this before. He's seen this receiver do this exact same type of move. He's seen this receiver run a fade versus this type of coverage. We know he's a vertical threat downfield. All these things apply. Now, when you do your 3 steps on the diamond release, obviously it matters that we have to sell it. We got to be a salesman. So after you attack his leverage, we're trying to make it look exactly like a fade. When you're running a fade, where are your hips and shoulders committed to? They're committed to that fade. So they better be committed to the outside. A lot of times on a diamond release, what receivers do is that their shoulder and their hip are starting to almost like drift inside before they cut. That gives the route away, fellas. We have to make sure that I'm committed with my hips, committed with my shoulders, running with long strides and running in full speed, a controlled full speed, because that's what makes it look the most like the fade. Pairing that together with the release that I decided to use, which makes it look even more like a fade, this DB has to open up his hips. So fellas, pairing your fade releases and your slant releases together is a very, very beneficial thing for receivers, and DBs cannot guard that because we are unpredictable. So now, next example of a release move here that wide receivers can use. It's a little bit faster, right? Because like the last example, I do realize a lot of you guys listening to this are in youth ball and high school, and your quarterback may not have a ton of time, right? So you may not have the time to work that attack diamond release or whatever the situation may be. You may not be able to work longer developing releases on certain routes. This is a very quick developing release that also pairs off of something called a speed release, off of something called a kick step. So let's talk about it. So this receiver's in like head up press, this wide receiver, or this DB's in head up press. This receiver's going to be running a deeper post route. So obviously on a post route versus head up press, we want to take an inside release. We don't want to force the outside release if I don't have to. We will if we need to. If this DB's inside shade press, we will take an outside release. But if he's head up, let's try to move him off that platform and take the inside release. So this receiver uses something called a wide step. So a wide step is exactly how it sounds. You take your back foot, you're stepping wide outside the DB's frame, and it's a way to sell vertical within one step. Now, you might think, well, isn't this very similar to the first example we talked about? But it is, but it isn't. Because remember, the distance of the DB matters in how I structure my release. So versus that first example, let's go back to the very beginning, right? Right up in our face. We probably couldn't do this wide step release and step vertical because we'd be running into him. We would have to step more lateral with this move. But in our next example here, the last example, is this DB has got some distance. So I don't need to step lateral. I want to step vertical. If I were to step lateral with this wide step and this DB jumped, there's still this gap of space, and I still have to get here, and he could easily cut off the angle and get hands, reroute, and disrupt the play. So we have to make sure that we step vertical and attack vertical to not only close the space, but to sell like we are going to the outside. So let's play at full speed, then we'll break it down. So this builds off of something called a speed release. So a speed release is also exactly how it sounds. You were trying to get off the ball with as much speed as possible and just essentially run around the DB. So let's talk about when you could use that. Like let's say this DB's head up and you have to run a fade. You could use this same kick step. And the kick step, fellas, this is not a false step. There are a lot of receiver coaches out there that will say that this is a false step. This is a part of the release. You see when he does this kick step, his hips kind of like load up for a sec. Hips load, explodes, right? So when you load up your hips like that, that allows you to step more vertical. That allows you to step more to the outside and have some speed, which is important on a speed release. On a speed release, you would kick step and then just run, right? So let's try to make it look like that for one whole step. He does this kick step and he just explodes, stepping wide. And you see hips, shoulders, step. Everything about this looks like he's going outside, and then we slip back underneath. So that's a very, very fast, quick, and easy way to pair your releases together off the ball. So let's play this again, full speed one more time. Great job by this receiver using that kick step into a wide step to widen the DB and get more separation over the top.